Well, I have to say, I wrote this book recently called Is Atheism Dead? And I started the book with a quote. It's a famous Solzhenitsyn quote. Alexander Solzhenitsyn was ruminating on what happened in Russia when everything went insane in 1917, and you talk about lawlessness. I mean, you talk about the Soviet Union, and people wondered, how has this happened to us? And the answer that they gave, which is really the answer to this question, is that men have forgotten God. Ultimately, when you forget God, when you turn away from God, things happen. And the things that happen are never good. And what we're seeing now is the result of a number of decades of turning away from God. But we haven't really seen the fruit until now. And what can only be described as madness. Most people know that what is happening is crazy. You can't be clear on what's a man or what's a woman. You're talking about defunding the police. Like, everyone knows that's crazy talk, but suddenly you're told, no, there's a new reality. It is because people have turned away from God. And the only question is, will there be people who believe in God, who are brave enough to say what God has to say for such a time as this? That's really the only question. Look, human being, since we left the garden, has been fallen and broken. And we always have to fight the battle. When people say they care about truth or science or whatever, oftentimes they don't. If you look back, I wrote about Germany in the 30s and the Nazis taking over. The Nazis basically had really, really strong ideologies that told scientists what kind of science they could do, what conclusions they could come up with. There is always the temptation for ideology to push around scientists, to push around people in any sphere, journalists. Anybody interested in truth and facts always is going to have a battle. Can I actually talk about what the facts show? Can I actually talk about the truth? Can I actually talk about the science? Or do I have to worry about the people who are paying me, or the people who maybe are going to promote me or not promote me? That's always been the issue. And so it's always been an ideological battle. Are we actually going to follow the science, or do we have an agenda? And if you believe God created this world, you're in favor of science. He created us to do science. He created the world for us to discover through science. But if you have an ideological point of view that says, well, we can't discover that or that or that because that's bad for business, you've got a problem. And so I think, again, this is the irony, is that science points to God, and then, of course, science points to the truth of God, to the fact that what's in a woman's womb is a human being. It's not a lump. Science can clearly say that now, even though you could say it as a Christian 100 years ago. Today, science sees that. Science knows that there are only men and women. So we're living in a time where people of science, people in the world of journalism, people in the medical establishment have to make a hard choice. Am I going to follow the truth and speak the truth, or am I going to say what I need to say for my self-interest? I'm writing about this actually in a new book called Letter to the American Church, because I think this is at the heart of our problems in American Christian culture. We, in a funny way, have made an idol of evangelism. Like, we've basically said that if I say anything that might push somebody away, I don't want to do that. I want to be sure that I can give them the gospel at some point. So I don't ever want to push them away. And you think, well, that's not how Jesus operated. There's a time when we're obliged to speak truth, and that's part of what it is to live out the gospel. And so we are living at a time where people have this bad theology that they think that if you say something true that might bother someone, don't say it because the gospel is at stake. And you have to ask the question, what gospel are you preaching? What thin, fake gospel are you preaching when you cannot speak the truth? The whole idea of the gospel is it frees us to only fear God and to only speak the truth and to leave the results in God's hands. And so I think people have created this caricature of some, truth-speaking monster who doesn't care about souls. But when you look at Jesus, when you look at the examples from Scripture, you see people who are willing to speak unpleasant truths, particularly at certain times, because they understand people's souls depend on that. It's not about just when we shift into evangelistic mode. Your whole life, what you say and don't say, is when people look at you and they say, is this person real? Is this person honest? Does this person answer to a higher authority? And if he does, that's really compelling. That's really interesting. Maybe he knows something that I don't know because he seems to really care about what's true. That idea has fallen on hard times, and it's vital right now that Christians understand that it's always nice to be liked, but sometimes God calls us to have another priority. Public education was always the idea of in loco parentis, that the parents are, maybe too busy working out in the fields or whatever it is, or trying to take care of little infants, and so they're going to, farm out the education to someone that they pay to teach what they would teach if they could. But when the government gets involved, obviously it begins to pull away from the original purpose. And so now we're living in a time where people in the federal government, in the Department of Education, have an insane idea that somehow what the parents think and want doesn't matter. And that is, if you have any sense of history, you understand that is communism. That is what it means when the state takes over and separates parents from their children. It is evil. It is nothing less than evil. It stands against certainly the traditions in this nation where, Burke talks about the little platoons and the family. These are the things that hold the whole culture together. And when you start acting like, well, we don't need that. We're going to do it, the government's going to take that over, and we don't care about what the parents think, what the families think. You realize things are utterly out of order, because whatever the parents want their kids to learn, that's what the kids should learn. And what we've seen, of course, is over time, the left has, it's done the long march to the institutions, and cultural Marxism is everywhere. Madness is everywhere. Specifically, explicitly, I should say, anti-Christian teaching is everywhere. It's explicitly atheistic thinking. So, as we said earlier, it leads to madness. And if people don't step up and take action and say, this will not happen, I will not fund schools that are not teaching what I want to be taught, I will not send my kid to those schools, parents have to understand things have gotten really crazy, and we've got to take this seriously. Well, we don't have any integrity left, which is why a number of people, some of them I'm privileged to call friends, are working very, very hard on this issue. Dinesh D'Souza came out with an extraordinary film. It's called 2,000 Mules. I have the privilege of being in it. The evidence that he shows is open and shut. And that's only from ballot stuffing. That's all that is. There's all kinds of other types of fraud that folks like Patrick Byrne and Mike Lindell have spent millions of their own money to save the nation from chaos and from control by Marxist elites. And so I think that anybody who needs to sign up as a poll watcher, needs to be involved. We cannot let our elections be anything but transparent. It is at the very heart of freedom and a free society. And what happened in 2020 was a good thing. It was a wake-up call to people that things are this bad. And if you do not act, America is over. and your children and grandchildren will suffer. I mean, to be blunt, the first thing we do is pray. We cry out to God because there is no guarantee that things are going to work out. But I really think we need to pray and trust that the Lord hears our prayers. And we need to also understand that the free market does work. If people want to be creative and create their own platforms, that has happened in spades since the madness of the last few years, since Twitter censorship and YouTube censorship and on and on. My program was completely wiped off of YouTube. It's absolutely crazy, but it has woken people up, and they are working hard to create all kinds of other platforms, and not only to create other platforms, but the platforms that exist, the people that are airing this program, this conversation here. More people are turning to those sources because they realize I can't trust those other sources anymore. So, it's a bit of creative destruction. I don't feel like it's guaranteed that it's going to go in the right direction, but I really believe that the nightmare that we have been living through has been God's merciful wake-up call, and that people are understanding I need to patronize those places that I actually know I can trust. And the people that have played games with the truth and that they're more worried about the bottom line than the future of America or my children, I'm not going to pay any more attention to them. I will never go to Disney again. I will never watch, whatever it is, you name it. But people need to get serious. And I think that the wake-up call, the craziness, has awakened a sleeping giant. I really believe that.